Hello, and thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Stephen Hodgson, and I'm the head of publishing for the AMEB. As you will most likely know, at the end of last year, AMEB released a brand new Harp syllabus, as well as accompanying gradebooks, technical workbooks, and a sight reading book. Today, we're delighted to have with us the principal consultant for the AMEB Harp Review, Alice Giles, to run through the various components of the new syllabus in some detail. Alice worked tirelessly alongside a team of harpists from around the country to construct the new harp syllabus, including Bronwyn Wallace, Level 1 consultant, Jacinta Dennett, Level 2 consultant, Frances Teeler, pedal harp consultant, and Catherine Ashley and Jill Atkinson, who formed the specialist advisory group. As Alice leads us through the workshop today, do feel free to use the Zoom chat function to send through any questions. We'll answer what we can in the course of the workshop, and we've also set aside a little time at the end for further discussion. One more thing before I hand over to Alice, I'd like to tell you a little bit about our very exciting competition that is currently running thanks to our very generous competition partners, Carter Harps Australia and Carmack Harps France, in celebration of the new AMEB Harp release. You or one of your students can win a Carmack Telen lever harp valued at $6,850. To enter, record a video of yourself playing a piece from one of the new AMEB Series 1 Harp gradebooks for preliminary to grade 4. Entrants should also answer the following questions in 100 words or less. Why should you win a Carmack Telen lever harp? Entries can be made at www.ameb.edu.au/win-a-harp. The link will also be emailed to you at the conclusion of the workshop. Entries close March the 29th, 2021, so make sure you get them in before then. So enough from me. Please allow me to introduce Alice Giles, although for many of you, Alice will need no introduction. Alice Giles is celebrated as one of the world's leading harpists, first prize winner of the 8th Israel International Harp Contest. She has had a wide and varied international solo career, performing solo recitals from London's Wigmore Hall through to Mawson Station in Antarctica. She also has an impressive international reputation as a teacher, having given masterclasses at major conservatoriums throughout Europe and the US. She was associate professor at the ANU School of Music from 1999 to 2008, and is currently lecturer in harp at the Sydney Conservatorium of Music. She's a Musica Vivas in Schools artist, presenting the harp to hundreds of primary school children with her show Adventures in Antarctica. Alice was awarded an AM, Member of the Order of Australia, in the 2017 Queen's Birthday Honours for significant service to the performing arts as a harpist, mentor, and educator, and through contributions to Australia's musical landscape. Welcome, Alice. Thank you so much for being here to lead us through this workshop today, and for your tireless work on the new harp syllabus and publications over the last couple of years.
Thanks so much, Steve, and it's really great to be here with everyone. Thanks everyone for joining in. It's been a great adventure, the AMEB Harp syllabus, and I've learned a great deal myself, and it's been great to work with my colleagues on doing this big new impetus for the Australian harp scene via what we can bring to the students. As you know, the harp syllabus was about 30 years old, so that was time for a change. What I want to go through today, we've got 2 hours, is going to be aiming to the practical. So I know that teachers will have practical questions about the syllabus, about the new publication. So a lot of the background and things about the process I'll try and introduce as we go through, starting with the technical work and then the grade books, then the syllabus, and a little bit on the sight reading, ending with questions. And Steve will let me know any questions that are relevant to the particular section we're going through as we go. So you can think about your questions in terms of that kind of order, and anything that we need to catch up on then with questions at the end. So just to start with, just a correction, as Steve said, Fran was pedal harp. She was the lever harp consultant for level 2. So we started with a purpose and mission, with the committee members getting together, and I just sort of refer to my notes so that I can be very efficient. The number one criteria in our purpose and mission was a logical progression that would allow harp students to feel that they were in alignment with their other students and friends who were on other instruments, working in the same way with the same diligence, that they would have an equivalence in grade levels. We had felt uniformly that this had fallen out of alignment with other instruments. So bringing that more into line with the other instruments of the AMEB, a more uniform standard within grades, and also to be mindful of publications that were no longer available, and to bring in some new music that had been written. Part of that was to make sure we have Australian compositions, and we're really very, very lucky that some of Australia's best composers answered the call to write for level 1 and 2, which is quite difficult to accommodate on the harp. And Carl Vine, Andrew Schultz, we had Elena Katz-Chernin, and some great harpists, Mary Damani, Christina Sonneman have been included. Benjamin Thorne is a New South Wales composer who's written a lot for the lower levels of difficulty. Ian Munro, Stuart Greenbaum. So a long list of Australian works that are clearly included in every grade. The other purpose and mission was to expand the current technical requirements to bring them in alignment with the new focus in the AMEB, which I just love, and that's that technique is not separate from music or repertoire. Its technique is to enable one to have the facility and the control to bring out your musical expression. So it's facility in scales and arpeggios, but they also have to have different aspects to help us with our technical control, and also to introduce the idea of technical exercises, which cover our harpistic effects, but also just different levels of control, playing in thirds or using slides, glissandos, that we need to encounter in our progress gradually through our harp journey. So we got together to decide on the level expectations. So end of level 1, grade 4, what one would expect, and it's a kind of a general overall understanding of basic harp technique, having encountered basic harpistic effects, and being able to complete short musical repertoire pieces. Level 2 is going into depth more, and by the end of level 2, a grade 8 would be considered the end of high school, entry level, tertiary, as on many other instruments in the AMEB. Level 3 is seen more as a tertiary level, maybe someone who's going to specialise in harp. AMUS maybe mid-level or first or second year tertiary level harp, and LMUS more for a professional level. So this was the framework we were looking at. It included the introduction of preliminary and certificate at the end of level 2, so that those two grades in effect also enabled a smoother progression through the learning process. The level 1, especially in the early part of level 2, was felt that we wanted a smoother progression to enable more depth, covering more repertoire and different technical approaches, rather than a quick progression through just using facility. And this also answers for teachers what can sometimes be an issue with younger students and their families wanting a quick progression through AMEB grades, just as their siblings may be going through on the violin, for example. And this smoother progression in the lower levels is hopefully going to answer that issue. So just moving on then, quickly before I forget also, this was a massive undertaking and there were many publications and we had many people assisting also with proofreading, and I think it's just an amazing outcome that we have now and a resource. Inevitably there will be a few mistakes, and we've noticed just a few. What will happen is if you notice a mistake, please contact the AMEB. There will be a spreadsheet and things will be updated and revised when there's a new publication coming out, a reprint. But also that's a resource then if anyone has a question and say, oh, I noticed this seems inconsistent, and the AMEB will be able to answer that quickly and refer it on to examiners, for example. So to start with the technical work, as I said, this idea of using a broad range. It doesn't encompass everything that someone will need to practice technically in their journey as a harp student, but it is a great kind of checklist. Not every year one will go through repertoire on the harp that covers all the different harpistic effects or fingering patterns that one might want, and so one can always refer through the technical workbooks to make sure that someone encounters something by a certain time. And the end of level one should have encountered a glissando, a xylophonic sound, predlatable, these kind of things, basic things, as well as certain kind of fingering patterns and arpeggiated patterns as well. I followed in the technical workbook preparation the new AMEB oboe technical workbook. I also had reference to others like the cello and piano ones, and this was really inspiring. And I wanted to make sure, even with scales, that students were able to have a sense of adventure. Scales can be boring for any music student, but on the harp they can be especially put aside, because you set the pedals and you practice once or twice and the student wonders how to develop their practice. So by including at different grade levels, different kind of fingering patterns, by the end of their studies, I'm hoping that the student will have a repertoire of interesting ways to go through scale practice to improve the technique, because we all know that it's a great way to develop technique. Discard that. Let's start by looking at the technical workbooks in specific. In general, the idea was to be often a little ahead of the grade levels. Of course, that's not possible at preliminary, but we did try and encompass a few things. In the preliminary, Alana's got up the grade 1, but I'll just refer quickly to the preliminary. It's basically to make sure people can understand what a scale pattern is, and how to play in thirds in a simple triad, arpeggiated, and an exercise pattern, so fairly unstrenuous. We're also very mindful of time limitations both in the exam and in students' practice, so as not to be too arduous. In grade 1, you can see there, if we can pull up that again, the exercise 1D, we've got the introduction already of basic glissandos, so that the student can feel that their technical work encompasses those things that they love about the harp as well, the sonorities, the use of different intervals you can see above there in the exercise 1C also, so that these are considered part of the technique. If anyone has any questions about the execution of any of these things, do type that into the chat quickly, and then I'll know if I should demonstrate anything. And Steve will call out if that happens. I can always refer back to it also. Grade 2, you'll see a progression in the exercises. One thing to note is, as with all AMEB exercises, the technical work, that is anything that's regarded as scales and arpeggios, needs to be played from memory. whereas the technical exercises can be played from the workbook. And you'll notice also in going through the level 1 technical workbook that we've kept in mind the kind of instrument that a beginner student might have. And so preliminary starts with a smaller range in case people start with a harp that only goes down to 5th octave C, for example, and has maybe limited levers, so that we're not ruling out a gradual progression for people to come through, starting off with their exams early so that it's part of a routine. That doesn't mean that others with, you know, a pedal harp from the beginning might not want to expand that out in their practice, but that we've been very inclusive and mindful of this in the technical workbook, especially in the first one. So we've got in, you can see up there, we're in grade 2. I think we've got Prédilatable. We might go back one. It's page 29. Is that correct? Yep, there we go. So we've got an introduction to Prédilatable, but it's been put instead of into an pure just exercise, it's been made into a small musical excerpt so that people can feel a little bit more rewarded in the practice. So also these options you'll see. So the left hand knocking on the board can be done with the 3 fingers. You see that there, yeah? So like that, or with a tapping, or with the knuckles, because it was mentioned by one of the committee members that, you know, young children may find that not so nice for their little soft fingers, so that there are ways of adapting these to make them accessible to all. But there are some basic things about playing at the board. And then the idea of swapping, so that then you're playing it with the left hand and putting that in a little piece. And also getting people used to that terminology, to be able to read the notation. So the idea of a percussive effect and how we notate that, how we notate it being in the left hand and then the right hand.
Alice, sorry,
Yes?
just 1 second. We've just had a question come through. Is the technical workbook to be used in conjunction with the pieces from the gradebook? Do the exercises apply to all groups of pieces A, B, and C?
Yes, so the technical workbook is to be used as the technical component of that grade level. So for example, here we are with grade 2. That will need to be studied as part of the grade 2 exam. And we use the technical work criteria, the idea of, you know, should we introduce an octave yet, and this kind of thing. In conjunction, from that we developed the repertoire for grade 2. So the technical work was well thought out first in terms of spreadsheets and criteria, and from that the consultants for particular levels and grades looked for repertoire that would match, and this involved, you know, adjusting when we get to the syllabus, adjusting things that were in the previous syllabus considerably.
So very, very closely linked, but not every exercise is going to apply directly to every piece, of course. And the aim is to fill the gaps sometimes also. If there was a technique that we really wanted to have in at that level, you know, obviously you can choose repertoire that doesn't cover every single technique and every single benchmark. So we wanted to make sure that the benchmarks were more or less in the technical exercises.
Yeah, absolutely, that's right. And sometimes they'll be introduced a year before, so you may not find that particular effect in one grade, but in the following grade. But they will have already then be familiar with it through the technical work, and that's consistent with AMEB guidelines that we were looking at. And the idea that, yeah, you might not always encounter a left-hand harmonic, for example, as we see here in the repertoire you've chosen, but we want to make sure that in grade 2 you've at least started to look at left-hand harmonics. So you might choose repertoire that doesn't include that, but then you've covered it in the technical work. And yeah, just let me know if that answers the question or not. when we get to grade 3, for example, we can talk about the different kinds of fingering patterns. So here we've got a standard fingering pattern. Also, not always does the choice of keys match exactly a progression. You're adding this further and further away from the C major that we start with, because we're always mindful of the lever harp relationship, and also the idea that you might deal with a key in a technical exercise rather than in the scales. And that sort of minimizes endless lists of scales, but enables us to develop a sense of pedal or lever patterns and harmony. And here this is a standard fingering, 4-4-3-4, but you'll notice at the top we've put in a 1-2-1, so that turnaround, and at the bottom a 4-3-4. Now that's quite advanced for grade 3, but it's put in there especially to keep people from just thinking, oh, if I can play that, achieve, you know, going up and down that scale, I'm fine, tick for my grade 3 work. What it does is it enables the student to see that there are elements there technically that they want to work on. The turnarounds top and bottom, especially at the bottom, are difficult. And this is something that you'll want to actually repeat and practice. It'll keep it slower. And this is the idea, to deepen the technical control rather than glide over it quickly. I know that there will be questions about that, but I think if teachers keep in mind that tempo markings are not the most important criteria. So if a student is ready for their grade 3 and they play that beautifully, evenly, but at a slower tempo, this is a really good achievement. And the fact that they've got a few there to repeat over, I love the idea of the repetition being written in there so that it gives students more to bite into, to chew on in their technical preparation, rather than just kind of setting the pedals and seeing if they're up to tempo. Looking
Sorry,
at, yes, sure.
One little thing, a question's come through. Why has a staccato been used instead of a breath mark for lifting?
A staccato, where are we? In that particular
exercise 2B.
2B. Yeah, okay. We're just let's get up to there. Going back, we're in grade 3. Excuse me. Yes. We're looking at, where are we looking at a staccato? Yes, the dot over the 3. This has been used consistently throughout, and thanks for bringing that up. This is a notation. You notice how the dot is over the fingering and not over the note. So it's not a musical staccato, but a sign to leave the string. So a comma is used throughout our publications as a musical breath. So to take time, as it would be in other musical notation. And the dot can be specifically placed over a finger, so it means to leave the string for that particular finger rather than afterwards. And that's then, so we've decided on. So anytime you see a dot, just check and see if it's over the fingering, that means to leave the string. And it's been used there so that it's clear you don't have to, you know, connect over there with the second finger, which wouldn't be so comfortable, but they're able to leave the string and slide down the board to the next group.
And also related to the technical exercises, we've had a question. Should students focus on the technical exercises for a good amount of time before moving on to learning the pieces? Is that the intention?
I would say that they should go hand in hand. They designed that they should fit the level, and that they're a great way to encourage students to start their practice with some kind of warm-up. They may set aside a certain amount of time, maybe at the start of their practice, before going on to their repertoire. And as a teacher, you can refer to those technical exercises. They're all in one place and they have a relevance to the student who will be doing that corresponding repertoire. That maybe one could go through a few in each lesson So there are not too many to be able to look at a few in a lesson, 2 or 3, and have the student practice those as part of their daily routine. Once that's been kind of mastered for the student, then the teacher can expand from those or go back to a previous grade and expand from those, using this as a guide, so that there's something that I love the way that they've been written out, so that the student has them to see, and it's easy to, as a teacher, to say, yes, let's do dominant 7th arpeggios number 215 for next week, and we'll look at the next one the following week, that kind of thing. So it's nice and structured. But yeah, definitely not to separate technical work and repertoire work, but to feel that they're all part of the same kind of practice that a student's doing. Looking ahead, we've up to grade 3, looking at the arpeggios. You can see that in grade 3, so we're still doing triad, so 3-finger arpeggios in this case, in different inversions, but put into 3/4. So there's a way of introducing the student to listening to, rather than just playing 3-2-1 as an arpeggio, to listen to the evenness of their sound due to the different accents in the meter, and to add in the difficulty of going downwards that often students find more challenging than going up and seeing inversions. So this sort of gradual progression. And you'll see how that goes into the next one. I don't think I gave that as an example to copy to the AMEB, but the next page has the same, exactly the same as what appears there. No, I didn't, sorry. Back. Exactly the same, but as arpeggiated chords. So that there's a natural progression for the student that's working in grade 3 between this and the corresponding arpeggiated chord. And this does correspond, because I've got that in my head, to grade 3 repertoire like Amaryllis, which uses 3-note in both hands arpeggiated figures. So there was conscious decision, this is what we're up to in this grade, let's think about that. And the next example that you did pull up there with the Alberti bass, number exercise 3A, yeah. So that's the introduction of this kind of Alberti bass figure does also correspond to the grade levels. So in grade 2, I think we have in the grade book, we've got an Alberti bass figure that's this kind of thing from the Mimura book. And here we've got in grade 3, and we've got an Ian Munro piece in the grade book for level list A that uses that kind of figure. So it's making sure grade 3, this is what we should have encountered at least, and understand the process of playing that. Introduction of right-hand harmonics. Now, most teachers might introduce left and right-hand harmonics in the same year, but it's a way of dividing it out, spreading it. There's a little bit more level of coordination in this one between the left hand and right hand than the grade 2 left-hand harmonic exercise, just to mark it out as a grade 3. And to checklist, okay, well, we've really achieved being able to think about right-hand harmonics and think about them in a musical way. You'll notice at the bottom of that page 2, exercise 3C, introduction of nails. So with contemporary harp playing, even at grade 3 level, we should be familiar with notation for nail playing, and with the fact that one plays them at the board. So this may be not something people have encountered, how to play a nail correctly and this kind of thing. So it's sliding along the board and being able to do it with both hands and in rhythm, being able to find nail harmonics at the quaver a little bit faster like that. So remembering, just a quick tip, if you don't put the string in between the nail and the fingertip, and put it in there and pull against your nail, which can be a little painful, just place the string about 1 millimeter in from the nail here and then hook past it. And that's a great way of achieving a louder sound on your nail with more energy and speed without it being an issue, especially for those students who, some people have their nails growing right to the end of their finger and it's really hard for them to cut them back enough to get nail sound. But if they hook past like that, it works well. And these are the kinds of things you want to be able to encounter with your student. On the next page, we've got, as part of grade 3, we're thinking about étouffée, which is a big part of our repertoire, our technical, the things that we're going to need to be playing in all sorts of harp writing. So correlating what might be the concept in right hand and left hand, actually quite different technical approaches, aren't they? Right and left hand. So using the back of the finger, very interesting minor key here, and with the right hand, and exploring with them the technique, the angle of the hand, this kind of thing. And with the left hand, at least by grade 3, one should have encountered playing single notes with the thumb with the hand open. So this just makes sure, yes, we've done that. And thinking about it in terms of playing cleanly, that kind of thing. So do stop me if I'm racing too fast, but I want to make sure I get through all this technical workbook with examples from different aspects. Moving ahead to grade 4, we're thinking about dominant 7s. We've encountered some dominant 7s before, I think, but here we've got the idea of extended arpeggiated figures, and you can see how it's been written out. We've also not only working on our facility and the placing of the extended dominant 7th, we've also got 5 beats of a rest at the end of each line. So it's important to discuss with students and for them to have an understanding of what they're going to do in a long note. We also have long notes. So we need to know what our technique is for dealing with that. And how to come back and place. And this is something that by having it there in the technical work, one can use that opportunity to discuss the resonance, what you're going to do in that time, and then how that movement that you've encountered in your facility of your dominant 7th extended arpeggio, how that translates into being able to then smoothly move into arpeggiated chords. This time with 4 fingers, just as we did it in grade 3 with the triads with 3 fingers. This is smooth progressions. And you just will no doubt notice that it's not comprehensive. We haven't done every possible permutation of arpeggiated figures and inversions and directions, because that will just take up about 10 more books. But it's kind of a starting point, and at some point, if you've left one out or whatever, it'll be covered. And a starting point to be able to think of. So good in your year to get onto these technical aspects early, and then use them as a springboard to others to complement the repertoire that they're learning. You can see also grade 4, this is mezzo piano or mezzo forte. So not looking at playing forte yet. So thinking about sonority, developing tonal control, muscular control, thinking about how sound develops rather than forcing a forte sound in something with this obvious technical demand. Yeah, grade 4, the technical exercise start with a slide. So we can go to the next page. We've got thumb slides starting. No, I think we're back one. Have we got thumb slides somewhere or other? I've left out a message for page 49. If anyone's got their books there, grade 4 technical exercises start with thumb slides. So we want to make sure some of the pieces may have encountered this already, but we know, and it's starting out with just a basic sort of anchoring here and only downwards. So going upwards will happen later in grade 5. And also on the same exercise 4B is sons xylophonic sounds, where we can encounter the notation for stopping at the base of the string. And there's a little arrangement of 3 blind mice there, but using xylophonic sounds. Sort of a little bit cute. Just as a way of making that moving around with the left hand to create the xylophonic sound and adjusting your right hand in coordination, a little bit fun. And some people who might do some Andres may have encountered this, but otherwise they may miss out until later on. And it was considered by the committee as one of our basic contemporary harp necessities. So for level 1. So now we can go ahead to our Aeolian chords and whistling sounds. There we go. So as a final level 1 technical requirement exercise, we've got Aeolian chords. These are just the coming past the string, so playing a glissando that sounds like a chord, basically, through just the closing of the hand and swiping past the string. And you can see how I do that in the right hand. There might be a little wrist movement afterwards, but it's just that. So you can see that the range of the notes kind of fits the swing of a finger if the hand is being kept still. So a fun way to finish the exercises and encounter basic modern harp technique. And being able to repeat, get a hang of it. And whistling sound, leaning right down the full extent of your harp. Now, a lever harp player, my little lever harp has nylon strings. If I was to play my grade 4 exam on that, well, actually I wouldn't be able to, because it only goes down to 5th octave C. But if the harpist only has nylon strings, they won't get a lot of whistling sound, but they can practice the gesture so that when they get a harp with some steel strings on it, they'll understand what the gesture is. And of course that will always be taken into consideration, those things. An examiner will know these things. So to get a whistling effect, leaning all the way down with your body and up very quickly and coming off quickly, not to muffle the sound. Any questions about level 1 before we go on? Technical workbook? I'll move on to the next one.
Nothing so far.
I'm bombarded with my quick whiz through. How are we doing for time? Are we doing okay? Yeah, I think I'm about on time. Technical workbook 2. So you'll notice Technical Workbook 2 is divided into 2. So that was one of the major considerations in our mission, was to make a good pathway for lever harpists. Lever harpists who are serious about the harp as an instrument in its own, and not just a starting instrument or a poor relation of a big pedal harp. So many harpists who do want to go onto a pedal harp will not do it directly on grade 5 or wherever the AMEB, but previously became too difficult on a lever harp. And they can continue on a little way, or all the way if they like, with their lever harp in level 2. But they will notice in the repertoire that it starts to move into specialised kind of genres that are specific for lever harpists, including folk and early music, and more contemporary styles. But in the technical work, it was very clear from the outset that we needed to have a separate workbook for each one to deal with specific technical things that were moving along in tandem, but may be dealt with in different ways between pedal and lever. So you'll notice that some of the lever exercises particularly for levers, are quite complex. But this, by grade 8, is considered something that's a specialty and one would need to work on technically if one was going to be doing grade 8 repertoire on a lever harp. And that compensates then for increase in range, for example, or pedal exercises on the harp, on the pedal harp. So you'll notice your technical workbook is divided into two. The lever harp syllabus can also be approached by people after they've gone through on pedal harp and taken as a separate kind of goal, maybe for a professional harpist or a teacher wanting to develop their lever harp skills for teaching. And that's also an excellent idea, and there'll be challenges and interest involved there in the different repertoire and the technical pathway. Looking at the scales and arpeggios, which you've got up there, grade 5. Grade 5 is now a deepening of our technical approach. And you'll notice finger slides, which is not a normal way of playing scales. But we've done the more traditional forms in level 1. So this is a way of engaging students' interest to also encourage them to learn how to do a 4th finger slide, to change up the accents in the fingers, to, I find personally this is a great workout. This is how I play a scale if I want to warm up, because I'm using the whole harp, but using all my 4 fingers. So going up, I think the thumb is the weakest finger for articulation, for sound. So this kind of fingering forces the thumb to be the main note on the beat. And going down, I think the 4th finger can be also the weakest finger sonorically and in control. So it addresses those issues as well. You'll notice some adaptations for pedal harps so that the exam is possible on a 40-string harp, so that there are adaptations for the number of octaves required, and so this has been also carefully thought out. And let's have a look ahead at grade 5. You can see in the arpeggios, hands together. Now we're doing a beginning idea of joined arpeggios. We're right, we're not in E major in any way. So there again we have a repetition, meaning that we're not only repeating the turnaround here, or we're not only doing a turnaround up here, but we're also having to do that turnaround, much as mentioned before in the scale exercises, with this needing to encounter both sides, the difficulty being more the 3-4-3 than the 2-1-2. It also introduces the concept of replacing on sounding notes and playing in different inversions. And we're concentrating now on 4-finger patterns rather than 3-finger patterns, extending the octaves also in the other arpeggiation exercises. You'll notice now, moving on to exercise 5D on page 18, an interesting oscillation exercise. So we had in the level 1 some oscillation in using 1-2 and using thirds, for example. But here this is using different intervals. Now the fingering itself, this is inspired, some of the exercises are inspired by Salzato's conditioning exercises, which was my inspiration for some of them. The idea of having that wider stretch would be unusual, 1-2 for going up to a 7th here. But it enables a greater movement for the thumb. So the thumb's really working. Oscillation is for the thumb. We do the oscillation when the thumb plays every second note, just like here. So it's the thumb that needs to practice that big closing. That's an exaggerated gesture. And you'll find it's a quite freeing wrist exercise. It prevents oscillation being always attempted in close position where one can get a little squashed up. But of course, not every hand size. There will be some young students doing grade 5, hopefully, and they may not be able to stretch 1, 2 as a 7th. And also some teachers may find that inappropriate or not working for their students or their style of teaching. So again, as with all the exercises in the technical workbooks, the fingering is a suggestion, and just to look at the meaning behind it, and it can be adapted. We've got double notes here, also in the next one, exercise 5E, where we start thinking about doing 2, 4, 1, 3. This is a standard pattern for us, grade 5. We want to be sure that everyone can do 2, 4 and 1, 3 and the reverse. And you can see how being put into 6, 8, it allows that little time in between, so that we're not scrambling for it or not thinking about it in unmusical terms. We're allowing time to come away and to place cleanly and to come back and play cleanly. When you don't see, so mezzo piano has been specified here and piano above to make sure that it's about full articulation and even control without strain. So we want a sound, but not working too hard. We just want to develop the idea of the articulation of these patterns. Scales and arpeggios in grade 6. Moving on to the next one, you can see another scale pattern. So each time we've introduced a new scale pattern. Doesn't mean that this is the only way during your year of grade 6, or if you teach that you're only going to teach offset patterns of scales. That's clearly not the idea, but that we are encountering different extensions. So this is a different level of difficulty to be able to offset your scales and to be able to play them evenly. And you see when we get to the top, this means that we're exercising 4-3 more. 1-2 is not a strength issue, but 4-3, now we've got a turnaround on 4-3. This means that the student is going to be needing to show in the exam also that their 4-3 fingers are as well developed now in their practice as 1-2, which is more a focus maybe of, level 1. Or not so emphasized. And the fact of the coordination, now we were also testing coordination. The alternation between starting with your right hand and starting the pattern with your left hand in the second line. So there are different technical aspects that are being approached here than just facility and increasing metronomes. So the metronome marks have increased each grade naturally, but they're not the only criterion, and they've been kept hopefully on the underside so that these other technical aspects can be deepened. We've got also the next one, you've got triplets just before you move on, and the next page has, for example, triplets so that there are accents on different fingers and that kind of thing using different modes. Now where we're up to there is the page 26, grade 6, an exercise for octave oscillation. So we had some oscillation in grade 5 with those different intervals. Now doing it with the 4th finger. So again, grade 6 is really developing the 4th finger and being able to handle that. And pedal slides and falling hail effect. So we've been able to incorporate an exercise that deals with pedal slides. Coordination of the pedal slide with the musical note in both right hand and left hand. So we're coordinating right hand and foot. So we're hearing and coordinating with both hands. Also, I'm getting the right key here. The falling hail effect, I'll describe that for those who haven't encountered that before. It's made, you can see how the 5th finger, the little finger, has been included here in the fingering. So we use 2, 3, 4, 5, and if you can see my hand there, thumb out of the way, 2nd and little finger are kind of back more towards the palm, and 3rd and 4th fingers are more forward. So you think about your fingers like that, and it's like that. So this way you've got a cluster of notes that are going to evenly, in a good hand position, run across the string. So you get a firmish sound rather than a floppy sound where they all end up on the same string. So this keeps them firmly in a cluster. So it's not that we have to hear, you can see how it's sort of notated as 3 notes. That's because you don't expect to get 4 different notes, but that shape will create a firmness in the effect. So this is a common 20th century harp effect and contemporary harp effect, and so it's encountered now in grade 6. And you'll notice a continuous slide here at the end. Now that's quite a challenge. If I'm not sure if I mentioned this, Alana, that's on page 65 for the grade 6 lever. So this is where we start having, I'll lift up my harp here. Every harp is slightly different. So there might be some challenges. Yeah, you've got your grade 6 lever there, that's great. But at some point one needs to, as a lever harpist, start thinking about moving double levers. There's my G. So being able to play this. Now that takes me a fair bit, not being a very practiced lever harpist. But I would say that if you can do it on your harp with one hand, this is excellent. But you might also need to think about doing it like this. Reaching over with the right hand, especially for a young person with a smaller hand. Some harps have different slopes. So any adaptation according to, what that might mean, well, I counted this in grade 8 too, can, should be taken into consideration. If things are not working, they'll have to be adapted for that particular lever harp. But it's important to start getting that in control and do it slower if necessary. Moving ahead to grade 7. No, where's grade 7? No, jumping back to the pedal harp one. What's our next grade 7? Our grade 7 one. So we can see the arpeggios with the hands together. I think you might be moving back one, or if I skipped one. That's 7-3. Yes, sorry, I've left one out. 7-3. Sorry, there it is. We can see we've got the introduction of melodic minors. So we've divided these over grade 7 and grade 8. The grade 7 one, you've got feet on either side, so E and D. And in grade 8, you've got them on the same side, so you have to be moving with the foot from one pedal to the next. There's a subtle difference, but it just divides them over and should be easily achievable, but it makes students less fearful of the idea on the pedal harp or on the lever harp of what a melodic minor scale is. I mean, they understand what it is musically then, and also that it's quite easily achievable on a lever or pedal harp. Just double checking that we have now, the next one is page 32. Or not. Yes, that one. That's it. So here's an extension. The development here with, for example, with arpeggios is playing arpeggios with a different inversion in each hand. And then in patterns. Make sure that that element of coordination is there. It's quite an unchallenging but smooth progression from grade 6. There are extended arpeggios also that just increase the speed and are looking at evenness rather than accents, for example, in the next one. The next example I think I put forward is on page 34. Yeah. So this is considered a technical exercise. It looks just like a scale, doesn't it? The first one there. But the idea is this is actually Salzato's Flight, which is an Elmas etude, but the idea of how you can build up facility and speed and strength during speed on the harp by just taking a small section. So it's taking the fear out of, so just doing group of two placings. So that doing it fast and loud, but just that small section, can give people the technical building block for playing with great facility and sonority. So grade 7 is seen as this kind of starting this discussion, forte and facility, and giving the student the opportunity to understand how that happens on the harp. We've got double slides also, you can see in the next exercise, so in thirds and sixths. That's quite a sophisticated technical exercise, and so fitting to grade 7. Maybe that might be the most challenging for some students. So we are encountering here some new challenges, I guess. And the next exercise, which I don't think I've passed through, given through as an exercise. Oh, do we have the next page? We do. All right. Exercise 7C. You can see how it's not just chords, but it's jumping in different directions, hands apart, encompassing the whole harp. So being able to jump hands in contrary motion and together using the whole harp, which is in itself a technical advance for us, because it's not all laid out evenly for us as on a keyboard. It takes quite a bit of development. And you can see double glissandos. So this is something that the students should be encountering now, not only double glissandos, but double harmonics. And really important to be able to discuss this, how to do this already in grade 7. I teach this. People have different kind of ways of playing double glissandos. So some people will put their hand up. I teach it by starting with a third finger glissando, and then just softly adding the second finger on top in a very loose way. And do notice in this one how some of the harmonics are double, just as in bar 3. That means playing them both as harmonics by placing the whole hand flat against the strings. And then in bar 5, they're single. So the lower note, played with the third or second finger, is a natural note, and the top one is a harmonic. So different little challenges here. Going ahead to grade 8, for example. Now, this is another challenge. You can see how we're not really focusing on keys anymore. We've got it in C flat major because that's just an easy sounding one. We're focusing here on, well, just between you and me, a way of getting a student to play a scale 4 times instead of once, because they've got a different fingering for each one. But it also means that they will need to demonstrate in the exam an ability to control which finger has an accent on it at demand. So, third finger. Okay, you start with a third finger. That one's going to have the accent. The most challenging one naturally is the one starting with the thumb. And some people might find that a bit of a stretch. But they'll just, that's also an important discussion to have in grade 8. How do we play with both hands down low on the harp? How to support that with the body. It's also a way of introducing scales in tenths, so people are not fixated on having octave scales. What else do we think? We've just got one more example, a few more examples. We've got the chromatic scales. Now, it's going to be a challenge for me on the lever harp. The idea is often not encountered of chromatic scales on the harp. It's a great way of really focusing in on the coordination of foot and hand, and for also the introduction. Can you see at the bottom line of Sans Isolés, which is really just simultaneously stopping the string while you're placing the next one. And in this case, if you're replacing on that, it's just the second finger. But if you're placing on the A sharp, you stop the previous note as you play. Like that, so that they all sound clear and isolated in the same way, rather than staccato. So that encourages the clean pedal movements and clean control. Now this is the one where you'll notice in grade in the lever harp that we should be able to pull that one up. Are you able to pull up the lever version? Yeah, thanks, Alana. This is again a bit of a challenge for me, not having practiced it on the lever harp. I'll just pull my music across to here. We've got these octaves moving. So the ability to move an octave like that. So it's important to get a technique for the way one gets those two and then pushes them up. You'll notice that the tempo is not fast, and if it's very difficult to do with the angles of your harp, so down here where it's steeper, it's harder to reach an octave, for example, down between third and fourth octaves. So we've got that at the end between the third and fourth octaves with a C sharp. That's not too steep for me here. But this is the technique involved, and I think Fran, who put together this correlation to the pedal partner one, to the pedal technical workbook, has considered this an important extension and important aspect for anyone doing grade 8 on a lever harp, and to make sure that they're able to do that. Do we have a question about that?
Yes, sorry, Alice. There was just one question, a few questions that have come through, but one that I thought might be good to answer now. Any recommendation for number of octaves on a harp for the beginning levels?
Yeah, so good question. That's we very carefully thought about that, and in the syllabus you will see in the technical project at the beginning of each grade there's a minimum requirement of strings. So 34-string harp.
Sorry, Alice, I think we lost you. We lost you there momentarily.
Yeah, I just got a notice saying it was unstable. Where did it drop out?
Maybe go back to it's all written in the book, basically.
Okay, so at the start of each grade in the syllabus, you will see the minimum range requirements and the minimum lever requirements. And I think in the lever, it never goes beyond 34 strings for the lever harp and fully levered. So level 2's 34 string and fully levered for the lever harp. You're not going to need a bigger one, and in level 2 is never going to go beyond 34 strings and levered fully, but level 1 moves in gradually because many people start with a harp with no levers. So preliminary is possible to do all in C major without any levers, or A melodic, natural minor. And in the grade book you notice there's no requirement. You can play it all on a harp without any levers, and just with the lowest string, 5th octave C. So you'll be able to see, if you follow the syllabus, how that's been thought out. And I hope that answers your questions about that. Was there another one before we move on from the technical work?
No, I think that's all for technical work right now. Great.
Well, moving on to, the other major publication series was the grade books. And the idea for this was so welcome for us to have our first publications. It's so great to be able to tell a student, yeah, well, just buy grade one book, and we've got a variety of repertoire at this one level. Many of our collections for the harp, most of our level one music is part of collections. And a lot of these collections are very wisely going from very beginner through to at least a few grades difficulty, so that you get a lot of use out of it. But it does mean, as a teacher, but it does mean as a student that you need several books, or you can't just use the one book, because you'll pass out of it very quickly into a more difficult area. So the idea behind the grade books was, they're just level one at the moment, was that they're all playable on the minimum requirement levers, and they didn't go beyond the minimum requirement technically. For example, I was very careful not to include things in preliminary that had an octave or even grade one, because this was considered it's not banned from the syllabus for grade one, but we've been careful not to select too many pieces in the general syllabus for using an octave in one hand. We're thinking more of using single notes and thirds, maximum of fifth, in preliminary and grade one, for example. So this we've been keeping in mind. The overall view of the technical of the grade books is that I wanted people to encounter a variety of musical styles, composers, and technical aspects. And my colleagues Bronwyn and Jacinta and Fran have done this also in the syllabus, but this was kind of having to manage that in a few number of pieces per list. I'm really grateful for the AMEB for allowing us, since this is our first publication, to extend to 5 pieces. I know this was a big extension for them. So it just gave us more options, because many harpists will be using this as their main book for a year. And so it had to make sure that we didn't have too much of one composer. Sometimes a harpist composer like Grandgeny or Salzato it does appear in more than one grade book. Over level one, that's because they're very important pedagogically. So, for example, Alana, you might like to pull up, I'm not sure, the grade books do also show a technical progression. So preliminary for chords, we have thirds. Oh, we've got coordination. I think we'll wait for that. To hold it there for a moment. There's a progression of chords through the grade book. So preliminary is thirds, as one, a scale in thirds. Something like that, or cuckoo with it's just in thirds. Grade one, we have Good King Wenceslas, which has thirds and sixths, so alternating between the two. Grade two has, I think, Cloister. No, we're not up to that. Sorry. Yeah, Cloister. Oh, there we are. Yeah, thank you. So grade two has the Cloister at Twilight, and that's been included because it's a beautiful sonoric study using fourths and fifths. So there's a musical feeling to that. Feeling fourths and fifths. And then grade three, we've got chords. And not sure if that, yeah, Amaryllis is the one. With those triads and chord shapes. And grade four is an extension of that using, hold it there because this is real, yeah, the Adagietto, yeah. So that's a much more sophisticated use of chords. So that's one technical aspect running through all the grade books that you'll see. So it's not perfect in all respects with all technical aspects, but that's one of the ones that's kind of had that flow through. Now, can we jump back and go to page 9, Drum and Bugle? That was the first one you pulled up. Yeah, thank you. So this is preliminary. Just for those who don't read music so well or whatever, preliminary has to kind of encompass lots of different age levels and musical levels. So some people won't read music much, but at least they can come in preliminary to an understanding of what hand coordination is, because that's so essential on the harp, to be able to coordinate your two hands. Not so easy, this one, but easy in terms of notes and thinking about hand coordination together. Page 17, we've got Renier's what do we know? King Henry's Dance. Can we go back by King Henry's Dance? There we go. Sorry, I'm jumping around for you then. It's great to have the music, thank you. So this is mostly second fingers, because I know that a lot of beginners will use mostly their second finger with alternating hands. The only hands together is now in octaves. So, and a few little simple 3-note placings. And using, you know, more different kind of new music. We've got page 19, we've got Autumn Leaves. You'll see in this one by Megan Reeve Melbourne Harpist. She's got a couple of publications out, and this is from one of them, where you'll see that shape here is in the technical workbook preliminary exercise. This shape is a great one for giving people their hand shape. And when I saw this piece, I thought, yeah, that's a perfect way for people just to practice in a piece of music their technical exercise, or they're finding their shape as a beginner harpist. Grade 1, we can have a look at Bartok. What do we get? Bartok, yeah. So that's unusual. That's taken from the piano Microcosmos, and doesn't look very difficult, but it's enabling the technical work to include the idea of different note lengths and sonority and different musical concepts, as well as hands working together beautifully and sounding together. So there are lots of different aspects to talk about with the student in this exercise or study that's very, very complete in this way. So looking at different aspects within the 5 pieces of the list A, different aspects, and being able to work on them with the student. The next one was quite different. The Gucking Glances last we talked about with the different intervals and a little bit of 2-hand coordination, both hands doing different things this time in grade 1. We have the Kurtag, I think that's coming up next page, Chanson de Berceau of Renier, with alternating hands. So this is a little bit more tricky. It will be probably good for ones who can read music well already and have got their preliminary coordination going down well, and you know, able to incorporate that into a nice little piece. Kurtag, I think, is up next. Yeah, so I love the idea of these Kurtag pieces, that pedagogical works by one of the great 20th century composers altogether. And he's written an enormous amount for piano pedagogy to encourage the idea of music being a story in sound rather than notes. So encouraging the student to listen. We've only got C's here, but to listen and have an adventure with their sound and their sonority, and they're jumping all over the harp, and the red notes is great because it's C and they can find all their red notes and make a dramatic piece and get a little bit of that creative juices going already in grade 1. The end of the grade 1 book has the Purple Bamboo. That means that we've got 2 versions for different tunings of lever harps, which is great. I thought that was a really good idea of Bronwyn's, that you can start doing your glissandos and have this lovely little piece and adapt it for different harp tunings that people might have at this level. Let's have a little look at grade 2. We've got, yep, this one, thank you. That's, as I mentioned before, the idea of the introduction of the simple Alberti bass at this level. This book, the Memorial book, from which this was taken, is actually now out of print, and that's been used a lot in the old syllabus. So I was glad to be able to take at least one of the excerpts from that. That's very nice, to be able to illustrate this little pattern in a way that's suitable for the harp, and as a progression through the grade books of different left-hand accompanying patterns. We've got for list B, we've got the Pareil, this one, Berceuse de Noël, which incorporates, it's not it's an easily accessible piece for people technically, but it incorporates different aspects which are important for grade 2, like different dynamics, different expression, being able to play slowly and control that, and prélatable, for example, and the concepts of playing a little faster, a little slower, senses of timing, and being able to create a beautiful little performance piece, so it's a little bit longer. Also got Australian piece, Heard on the Wind. This is a movement. Andrew Schultz wrote us a little sonatine, and some of the piece movements are in different grades through level 1, and you'll find hopefully that you older students, especially mature age students, there are pieces in all these grade books that will really appeal to them. They're solid musically, and not just baby pieces. Basically, there's a sophisticated atmosphere piece, and really well written for the level, and that's really welcome for us. Grade 3, an example. I'm just taking little snippets from each one, and happy to answer questions on any thing that people have found. Yeah, we've got Ian Munro, an adaptation for from one of his piano pieces that I just really saw. This was so good to get that Alberti bass figure that one should have mastered now in grade 3. But it's a beautiful melodic little piece. So how that left-hand automatic thing goes along while you're creating this very lovely melody, and quite haunting. And page 18, I think list B, we've got the Amaryllis, which demonstrates the use of arpeggiated figures, and how these work hands together, how to roll the chord. It's one of my first teaching ways of getting people to practice a beautifully smooth arpeggiated chord, and I think that's important in grade 3. I think we've got Handel also as an example coming up here. This is a beautiful piece from the Victoria Klein series that's now out of print. This particular volume is out of print, and I think it's a very, very beautiful piece. It need not be played at the metronome mark, although it's a minuet. I really like it a bit slower. So don't let your students be daunted by this one because of its coordination. I've fingered it so that the left and right hands leave the strings at the same time. I think that makes a big difference to the way how accessible it is for a student to learn about 2-part writing without it being too tangled up together. And we've taken out the grace notes and trills and things that were making it a little bit fiddly, and it's a beautiful little piece to learn about this kind of part writing and coordination. So an extension of coordination again. Greenbaum, Stuart Greenbaum wrote us also a little suite when he was in Sweden, specifically for our syllabus, and I unfortunately couldn't include all the movements in the grade books, but absolutely really fun one, and to introduce syncopation. It's a great little syncopated one using very basic patterns, but the rhythms, so that you can really get a hold of the rhythms while using really good feeling harpistic patterns. And the idea here of doing muffling, that kind of thing, with the left hand. And to introduce people at these early levels with Australian compositions and Australian composers. Grade 4, so this is the last of the grade books. No, this is grade C. Right? Well, let's go back. So Path to the Sea, back one. Yeah, Path to the Sea is from one of the Gustafsson books. It's a really great way of seeing chords for a teacher. For me, looking at that, it looks quite simply achievable, but actually for a student, as probably as teachers also know, seeing those different shapes and making a beautiful piece out of them is quite a next step up. And it's just a great atmosphere piece, just like the cloister in grade 2, of working on chords as sonority, how to get that continuous legato sound and look ahead and place the next shape so that the sounds resonate and we don't get, placing back and stopping the sound, but beautiful continuous sound, these kind of things. This is what I mean about broad deepening in the repertoire, deepening your technique. We've got in grade 4, jump ahead now to grade 4. I love this one, was a suggestion of colleagues as a technical work, and my students just love it as a technical study. The patterns just work so beautifully for us on the harp, and the students just love it. It's also a harmonic study, so people have to think about what chord they're playing relative to the key, and they love the little patterns. It's got those chord patterns as well as oscillation. Different ways of doing that. Left hand, of course, someone might choose to play it with a thumb to muffle on the, for example, the end of that second line. But I think it's sounds nice to let the harp ring here, and it's not disturbing. List B, we've got Dumani, I think. Well, that's list C, excuse me. I've given a couple of list C because, the Adagietto is sorry, making you jump around, Alana. This is an extension. I find that students find this one quite difficult at a grade 4 level to see, but it's a great one to approach and work on, and especially for a student who's advanced musically. Really great for them to look ahead and learn about these chords. Now, this piece, I think, was in a lower grade than grade 4 in the old syllabus, so it's also a note to teachers to see how this progression is now clearly laid out for you to see in the grade. Rather than trawling through your syllabus, in the grade books you can actually see what is the benchmark for each grade, basically. So this would be, I would say, slightly more difficult, the list C pieces, some of them, and there are easier ones in grade 4, but within this ballpark is our level for grade 4. And Vine, we've got a beautiful piece by Carl Vine, also list C, I think, here, Music Box. So Carl's written us a couple of pieces. I'm going to get on to the other one soon. A lovely little idea of little patterns. So coordination using slightly different patterns, using 6/8, using hands together in the pattern, and then offset. So alternating patterns in a nice, lovely little piece that also uses a bit of lever change and that kind of thing. So lovely broad range, including at least 1 or 2 Australian pieces in each grade book. So now let's move ahead, unless there are any particular questions about the grade books. Steve?
Nothing has come through. Just a reminder to everybody that there's a chat function as part of Zoom. It might appear at the bottom of the Zoom window. You can click on chat and then type in a question to us or to everybody, just in case you weren't aware of it, but nothing's come through at this stage.
They caught me having a drink of water.
Sorry.
Right, so I'm just sort of lambasting people here with this.
Oh, sorry. And we've just had a question come through. Are there any plans to release grade books for level 2 in the future? I'm probably better placed to answer that. We release grade books for level 1 for quite a few syllabuses, and for syllabuses that become higher use. So lots of people taking exams. We can put together grade books for those as well. Obviously, it's an incredibly resource intensive activity to put together a set of grade books, and we have to know that we can support that through the sales of the books, I guess. So the answer is yes. There could be grade books for level 2 in the future if we can build a good case for it. But at this stage, we'll probably just have the level 1 grade books for a little while.
So buy lots of grade books.
Well,
Is the answer.
yes.
I'm finding them so useful. It would, of course, involve a grade book for lever and for pedal. So the current grade books, level 1 being combined, it's for both lever and pedal. But then moving on, it would have to be separate. So that's also a bigger undertaking. But yeah, do encourage everyone to buy them, because this is really supporting what's going on in the way AMEBs is supporting us as harp teachers. So the syllabus manual, so when on looking back for today on our purpose and mission, one of the things we had listed was to refine and limit the number of pieces in lists, and I'm afraid we seriously failed in this respect, although we did keep it to a consistent level for each list. And there was a strong push to concept to make sure that we covered, just as in the grade books, all possible technical aspects for that grade, so that, you know, to make sure you had a piece in grade 5 list A that covered octaves and arpeggios and scales and sonority and musical, you know, all these different aspects, to look at that breadth overall and recalibrate that. It was updated, things out of print have been taken out, and so it's had a major overhaul. The major thing that you will notice as teachers is that the grade progression has changed considerably. In level 1, it could be with the addition of preliminary and certificate at the end. So we've got really 10 grades over level 1 and 2. It's a smoother progression. You might notice things are about 1 to 2 grades out. In a level 2, definitely at least 2 grades out. And so by the time you get to end of level 2, what was in the old grade 7 and 8 is often in level 3 now. So I think my feeling is this has brought us more into alignment with other instruments at the same, what would normally be year level of study. And also it's brought us into line with other international standards. You won't see it direct correlation with all the levels with other international grades like Trinity, but in general, the idea of contemporary and lever, introduction and inclusion is very similar. And I would say that the end of each level, for example, the certificate for level 2, and the idea of where one transitions into level 3 is of an international level. So where we arrive at is a smooth progression towards a very high level of harp playing, but in a more rounded way. I pulled out because we can't go through all of the syllabus, obviously, and what's changed, but it might just give people familiar with some pieces from the old syllabus an idea. For example, from the old grade 4, so end of level 1, Moorish Garden, which is a perennial favourite with students, is now in grade 5. One of the reasons for this was it's too long. It's longer than, so length was a consideration. Too long for grade 4 and too many different aspects technically. Too difficult for someone of grade 4 maybe to get from memory and play that fast thing at the end with any depth. It's often hard on the harp to get a piece that has consistent technical demands. We notice this, for example, in Dussek sonatines. You're going along fine at one level and then there's a few bars of something really hard, and this can kind of be quite disruptive. And so we've tried to choose pieces that also have consistency of level, or that the difficulty is then, for example, Moorish Garden, the last page, is a technical difficulty and the rest is balanced out through length and the musical expectations of that level. There was even some talk about putting it in grade 6, so we've kind of made a bit of a compromise there. Also, what used to be grade 4, Grand Genie, Noel and Pastoral and Hasselmann's pieces, they're all now in grade 5 as being a deepening. So grade 5 has been seen as a deepening of what one achieved at the end of level 1, rather than a steep jump technically, so more breadth in grade 5. From grade 5, we have Tournier 4 preludes, for example, were all in grade 5 previously, and now 1 and 3, preludes 1 and 3 are in grade 6, and preludes 2 and 4 are in grade 7. So we've differentiated there as we've spread things out. We've had more room to spread things out. Vic Wedding Piece, Lloyd Vick's Wedding Piece, a great little piece, but quite technically challenging and quite long. So too long for grade 5 pieces, which are more like 3 pages maximum. So that's gone now to grade 7. So a big jump from grade 5 to 7. Grade 6, we've got now a deepening of complexity of directions, multiple demands within one piece, coordination, replacing patterns. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to play you Lament by Carl Vine, who wrote this especially for our syllabus, and we put it into grade 6. And just as I play it, I mean, I just practiced it up yesterday, so don't pay too much attention to the tempo. I'll try and play it musically rather than in tempo, but it's got 7/8, so a complexity of meter, and hand coordination, so little patterns and things, musical expression, very, very musical depth, great depth to it. But if you compare it to what was before, Britain Interlude, Rodrigo Impromptu, Britain Interlude is now grade 8, and Rodrigo Impromptu is in A Mas, Havana's Nocturne is in Certificate. So these have been pushed up to the end or over into the next level because they're all more demanding. I mean, I'm really happy if I have a high school student who could play any one of those, you know, Britain Interlude, Rodrigo, more like, you know, first year A Mas, or tertiary level. Song in the Night, these are more the pieces that one would want an end of high school student to be playing and not encountering in grade, you know, 5 or 6. But let's listen to this Lament, because I think it's such a beautiful piece, and it's available separately, not as a collection or in the grade books. Bumping into something. So you can hear the level of the pieces that have been written especially for us, and be adventurous and look for those. So give me a B, but for the few little mistakes, but I think just such a beautiful piece and an example for you to compare. Quite a sophisticated musical piece, as you can see, but not involving all that length or jumping around that maybe, and harmonics and things, big chords that written interlude has. From grade 7 from the old syllabus, Salzedo, we had some Salzedo etudes that are now in Elmas, quite sophisticated, and just really, if a student at grade 7 level, new grade 7 level, was learning those, which I have people start flight really slow and very early on, I wouldn't want them to be playing them in an exam at that level. So this is the idea, that we've got so much wonderful repertoire now on the harp, that we can be broadening and not pushing ahead too quickly in performance tempos and concept or length.
Just a question that's come through. eBear's 6 pieces were spread across grades 6 to 8. Now they're all together in the certificate. How were decisions like this made, where pieces of varying difficulty were placed together in the later grades?
Right. Well, certificate was seen as a way of putting in longer pieces, so that someone doing certificate could be seen as someone who wanted to have really be able to put together a little recital. They may not go on to AMAS, but many pieces that could be collected from earlier grades could be put together as one longer piece. So 6 pieces, for example, eBear can create a decent sized long piece. We don't have so many that have that kind of gravitas, you know, a nice number. So by the time you get to certificate, you can play all the levels up to then, and also be able to be presenting them as a one longer piece. So sometimes they've been separated, as I said about the tournier, but sometimes they've been brought together as one larger piece in a higher level because of that length consideration. So yeah, it's a way of also making sure that those pieces are present as an option, where otherwise they may have not been, you know, so, oh, yeah, we better include eBear, let's put it in there so that people have the option. If they've been playing them over the years, now they can bring them together in their certificate. So that's another comment for teachers, that you might want to look ahead to certificate or to a higher level and slowly prepare some pieces that they might not get up completely, all 6 in 1 year, but they might prepare them over the years. For example, Tournier Noëls are in different years. You know, you might want to do them in different years, but they may then become part of the repertoire as a collection. So it's been looked at in different ways, not in one way, as different pieces present themselves. Is that do you think that's?
I think that's great. Thank you very much.
So we've had, in grade 7 now, we have John Thomas Minstrel, which is about what we considered a kind of a minstrel's adieu, a benchmark for grade 7. So like a longer piece involving more different technical demands, but achievable for someone at this level. Dussek sonatines have now been put in, you know, in that level because they have a complexity. Sometimes if you see a piece that stands out in a grade, in a list as being easier, it's a way of looking at it as though the expectation would be that that piece then would be played at that musical level as the other pieces, so that the student doesn't want to only present difficult pieces technically in their exam or in their year's work. They need to have pieces where they can be able to musically express themselves and learn how to do that as well. So, but there would be an expectation it would be played in that way. So thinking about a holistic approach, a musical approach to their repertoire, as though it was a broadening in that way. Also, Grangeni's Children's Hour was in grade 7. I know it wasn't the whole lot, but that's now moved to AMAS as quite a sophisticated piece technically. Pichetti Sonata has moved to AMAS from grade 7. It's on, you know, professional books, and that's sort of more level 3 concept. From grade 8, Bach Blues Suite. I mean, I played that after I won the Israel competition. Took me a year to learn. So I think that's, responsible to put that in level 3 as a complete piece. Hasselmann's and Zabel Source have both moved into AMAS as well. And yeah, just in general, certificate has involved, has longer pieces. I think those are all the examples I pulled out, but maybe there are others that someone has questions about.
Nothing so far.
Right. Yeah, well, I kind of whizzed through there because I was afraid I would run out of time and have tons of questions. But yeah, I think just a bit of a background again to that syllabus criteria, and again a big thank you to my colleagues, Jacinta for level 2 and Fran for the lever level 2, and Bronwyn for level 1. That took a long time, and what we noticed was at the start we felt, oh yeah, these are our technical criteria, now we just put all the pieces in that level. But actually, as I said before, not many pieces of music just have one level in them. So while we've tried to have, something that seems like grade 5 in grade 5 and doesn't have such and such, and only has a few pedal movements or isn't longer than 2 pages for grade 5 and this kind of thing, is not always possible. But there was quite a bit of playing through. So for example, Jacinta sent me a PDF of all of grade 5 list A. She sent me everything, but for example, list A, and I would play through all of grade 5 list A, and then I would play all of grade 6 list A after that, and say, okay, well, maybe that one could move, or, because we all have different perceptions of technical difficulty also, and as do all our students. So it's in the end a bit of an averaging out, but having had a committee that made it a lot easier, and we felt a lot more reassured in our decisions, knowing that, yeah, it's never going to be quite perfect because of those differences, but that's how we started with that template, but then there was that fluctuation through playing ourselves and each of us playing through and saying, well, maybe this one tips into that grade, or maybe this one tips into that grade. And keeping in mind that on the harp, it's hard to play something difficult not so well. You either play it or you don't play it, in a way. You can play it a bit slower. You either hit the string or you don't. And so it's really great for us now, I think, to have a bulk of repertoire that is playable at the level. It's not, oh, we'll play this really difficult piece, but we'll play it to our, grade 5 level or something. And I think that's really important.
Alice, sorry, we have just had a question come through. I was just wondering regarding the length and demand of pieces in grades such as AMAS. How is a piece such as Ravel Introduction and Allegro, which is quite long and technically demanding, leveled with Westlake's Towards the Midnight Sun?
Great question. I'm so glad you asked that, because that is quite different, and this was my area of actual specific putting forward of repertoire. And what I did, because at this level we've got great pieces of all different lengths, and other AMEB syllabus instruments have the option of creating a program length. So this is what we've done for level 3. So you put together a recital of a certain length, and within that your program must include from list A, B and C at least one, and then choosing at will to make up from those lists your program length. So that means that a short piece that's really difficult, 2 minutes, flight in Elmas, can be balanced out by a longer piece, you know, a concerto movement or something like that, and that you can put together. What happened previously was also that you could get through AMAS really, really quickly by choosing, you know, such and such pieces from each list, and whoop, the recital's over in a quarter of an hour, 20 minutes. I don't think that was problematic for me musically. So this is how you can have these different length pieces like Westlake and Ravel side by side. Is expected that the student and the teacher will put together a program that will show a balance of technical and musical variety within that time frame, and also a balance of styles and eras. And there's you know, this is why we got away from the idea of studies, and also we avoided having piano accompaniment, because this then gets complicated, gets messy for recital purposes. But I hope that that's clear, and that's really important to get across, this importance that it becomes then. It also allows, I'm thinking anyone in doing AMAS or ELMAS is pretty serious about the harp, whether they're going to be a harpist or not. They're pretty serious. So they're going to also want to, with their teacher, develop their own style. They're going to want to choose repertoire and a mix of repertoire that's relevant to their own needs, and to develop that according to what they might need to do in their university or school, or have a recital, this kind of thing. They can put together a little bit more freely a balanced program from that repertoire. And again, levels may not seem commensurate. And yeah, one comment was, oh, Elmas has got all the most difficult pieces in their repertoire. But I think I wanted to also show that, yeah, harp has a really high level now internationally. Expected internationally is that one should be able to play Britten suite when you get to Elmas level, you know, and that all our progression from preliminary through has been very slowly graded towards that ability, and with fabulous amount of Australian music in each of those levels, which I really encourage people to explore through the Australian Music Centre if they don't have the music already, because you can oftentimes get a sample of an example from the library to rent via PDF version. So as ways of accessing this music, to try out the new Australian pieces too that you might be unfamiliar with, and that made the lists very long. But that's because you want to choose several from a list, possibly to fill out the time. And also we've got a lot of 20th century music and a lot of Australian music, and it's fabulous. And I really like the idea of encouraging people to branch out and have a very varied repertoire.
Along those lines, we've had a question come through in the syllabus for level 3. To make up the length of the program, there's the option to include single movements of works. Does this include single movements of art pieces such as Edwards' The Harp and the Moon, or more focused on concerto style works such as Ravel or Debussy dances?
Yeah, I think people should use their discretion, but I think that as long as it sounds complete in itself, then that's okay. You know, it is an exam after all, and not you know, major recital somewhere. So this concept of movements enables people to be a little bit more flexible. So I would say it's more for sonata form ideas, but also for contemporary works. You can see that some of them are divided into multiple movements so that they can be balanced. You can choose 3 movements from a contemporary work that has multiple small movements, as long as it has an existence that makes sense.
And it's really just to provide,
for example, and much better to be able to approach Edwards and be able to play a section of that movement than to say, oh no, that will be too long, I can't do that.
It's really to provide flexibility so that, you know, you have these options to touch on composers that you might like to try out, or that you might have a particular interest in, even if it doesn't form the sort of core backbone of the AMAS recital in terms of those 4 complete pieces.
Yeah, And also something like Prokofiev Prelude, because of its shortness, can be maybe previously have been included. I can't remember where it was previously, but in level 2 or something because of its shortness. So how could you put it in a list in AMAS? But it's a piece of that level, and this is the way we can incorporate those pieces which we think are appropriate also pedagogically for someone of that level, rather than them trying to approach it and perform it at too early a level.
Thanks for that. That's great. No further questions at this stage. Did we want to go quickly just touch on the sight reading? It's now 10 to 4.
Yeah. Yes. I completely forgot. And not being a great sight reader. Mary Domani was our sight reading person. She composed the sight reading excerpts. What happened was I put together a little template for her so she could see what the grade progression was technically and in terms of harpistic effects. And I followed guidelines for other AMEB templates for sight reading books from trumpet and so on, and this was how it seemed to be very effectively done, that the sight reading then would be a couple of grades behind what one would expect in the repertoire. The sight reading will be a couple of grades behind, obviously taking a while to catch up there in the preliminary. What Mary's done, and it's done a great job. I asked her, there was a question with the sight reading book, should we put fingering in, should we put pedaling, these kind of things. Fingering is definitely not prescriptive. The person sight reading can use it if it aids them. Sometimes I find it really easy. If I've got some fingering, I'm almost sight reading fingering as well as, groups and patterns as well as the notes on the harp. And so other people who see and think like that too can be aided in their sight reading, and that's part of harp playing. Most music you see as a solo might have fingering, an orchestral excerpt won't, but that's at a much higher level. Some pedaling in for it though first. So also the idea of division between the hands, for example, for preliminary, that's not prescriptive either. If someone's better off just going through second fingers or with one hand, this is fine. It's just about getting people used to the idea of what it is to read and giving the teacher a resource to pull out and put on the stand and say, let's go through a little bit of sight reading today. And this can be supplemented with other sight reading. We've given some resource material also in the beginning of the syllabus, some other sight reading available books, especially there's some New Zealand ones. The examples you'll see here are collections. So Mary sent through, a bunch of examples, and we held back a specific number from those for the actual examination ones, so that they would be in line. I chose, a series from grade 1, sent through 15. 3 of them will be taken out and put in the examination handbook. And just for peace of mind, they're not the most difficult examples. So the student can be stretched a little bit in the sight reading handbook and feel that if they can handle those in the stress of the exam, they should be quite fine.
Sorry, Alice, just going back one step to the level 3, a question that I thought might be good to answer. Are the additional pieces weighted equally to the A, B, and Cs for AMAS and LMAS, or is the performance marked differently?
No, absolutely. This is just a way of making sure, saying A, B, and C is just a way of ensuring that someone plays at least one piece from each of those different eras and musical styles.
Just to ensure a diversity of styles.
Exactly, thank you.
But there's no weighting towards those. It will be marked as a recital as a whole.
Exactly, yeah. It's a complete package, and it should be presented as such, that it's showing an ability at this level of musical and technical maturity. Yeah, so there are combinations in the sight reading of musical. So thinking about groupings of rhythms, these patterns, also of harpistic effects. For example, in grade 8, you're meant to be able to understand how to play at sight with a fingernail and predilатable at the same time. Remember how we encountered that, I think, end of level 1, beginning of level 2 in our technical work. So these kind of concepts. Just be mindful also in the technical work, it's not always, workbooks, it's not always the same between pedal harp and lever harp. So you might see a lever harp piece in the sight reading book that has different notes, has different accidentals, whole different thing, and that's to do with needing to read in different ways. And Mary's just adapted the composition of a similar aspect for lever and for pedal, so it's not a mistake if it looks different. And in any case, it's a resource, so the teacher can always use some of these rewrite variations, so that, because it's by no means exhaustive. And yeah, different kinds of patterns. We were aiming to look for using harpistic patterns that, as far as placing goes, that would be found in the grades and in the harp repertoire. And also being able to read musical notation at the same time, as in gradually being able to incorporate musical gradations like crescendo, diminuendo, switches in rhythm, and articulation during an excerpt. I'm not sure if there's any kind of anything else to elaborate on for the.
No, I think that makes it very clear. The book is there to really give a guide as to what the level expected at that grade is, and also make clear the very strong link between the technical work and the sight reading at each grade level. Look, I think we're more or less coming to the end of our time. One more question that just came through: is there any chance of a book of orchestral excerpts being published? I can answer that. There is no specific orchestral excerpts requirement for the harp syllabus, unlike the brass syllabus, where an entire list from grade 5 to grade 8 is list D is purely orchestral excerpts. So we have published a book of orchestral excerpts, or incorporated the orchestral excerpts in the technical work for brass as we move through those syllabuses. But there's no plans at the moment to publish a specific orchestral excerpts book, because we don't require an orchestral excerpt at each grade in the same way that we do for brass. But thank you very much for that question.
Yeah, and also there are some resources I think mentioned at the beginning of the syllabus where we mention resources. There are some orchestral excerpt books mentioned there, and also in the syllabus lists when an orchestral excerpt is given. Sometimes it's part of a collection, so there are resources already available of orchestral excerpts. So that's probably been well addressed in other publications. And we used orchestral excerpts when they fitted those musical and technical criteria of the particular grade level, and rather than keeping them, as Steve said, as a particular
requirement
focus. Also just reflecting modern day reality for harp students. It's not always an outcome at the end of levels 1, 2, and 3 that a harpist will go into an orchestra. They will undoubtedly, if they get to that level, play in an orchestra in different situations. but it's it's not always going to be the case, and especially leaver harpists or some harpists just going to certificate and planning to stop there will not be even thinking of orchestral music as a genre they're interested in. So we need to encounter that reality too and cater for it.
Thank you so much, Alice. I think we're really coming to the end of the workshop time now. Before we go, I would like to remind everybody about the very exciting competition that's currently running. Again, thanks to our very generous competition partners, Carter Harps Australia and Carmack Harps France. Again, you or one of your students can win a Carmack Telen lever harp valued at $6,850. And to enter, it's a video of yourself playing a piece from one of the new AMEB Series 1 harp gradebooks that we delved into during the workshop. And also a brief 100 words or less answer as to why you should win a Carmack Telen lever harp. Entries can be made at the link, which I believe has appeared on screen. Again, we'll send some information out at the conclusion of this workshop. But thank you so much, Alice, for that in-depth and insightful overview of the harp syllabus aspects, the technical work, the repertoire, and the sight reading. The syllabus and all of the publications, of course, are available at your local music shop. They're also available via ameb.edu.au and other online sheet music retailers. Thank you once again to the entire team that worked on the new syllabus and publications. Alice Giles, of course, Bronwyn Wallace, Jacinta Dennett, Frances Taylor, Catherine Ashley, and Jill Atkinson. The proofreading and editing team behind the publications, the tireless AMEB typesetter David Howell. And thanks also to the behind the scenes team, Jeff Higgins, Leah Phillips, and Alana Caldwell for their work in making this workshop possible. To the AMEB CEO, Bernard De Pasquale, and the other AMEB staff. And last, but certainly not least, to all of you who are attending this workshop and for your thoughtful questions. We hope that all of these resources prove very useful and a wonderful part, or very useful to teachers and students around Australia. We're very proud of it. We think it's been an incredible undertaking and an incredible result from this excellent team. Thank you once again, Alice, and all of the attendees, and goodbye. Have a lovely Sunday.
Thanks, everyone. And thank you, Steve. And thank you to the AMEB for supporting the harp. It's really a great thing for harp students in Australia.